Through the study of local history, we become familiar with and learn to value the local environment. This helps us appreciate the elements of our past, which give us and our locality a sense of identity. As the pace of change becomes faster, a sense of identity, belonging, and being connected is vital for the emotional well-being of the individual and the community at large. Being blessed with a local historian of note, Mr. Freddie Burke, who has so often assisted us in our local history tours, we decided to avail of a marvellous opportunity to put together a record of some aspects of our heritage for the benefit of both our pupils and the community at large. Volumes could be written on the history of this little parish in the southeast of County Clare, and therefore, of necessity, we had to choose what we considered to be of importance as a reference for teaching local history to future generations of school children. As the old adage states, we are our past, and therefore, in appreciation of our ancestors who worked so hard and suffered so much to ensure that we would enjoy a better life than theirs, we have decided to include a taste of our present-day lives as a celebration of their selfless sacrifices. Clonlara, incorrectly changed to Clonlara, means the meadow of the mare. It seems there were sightings of a grey mare in the meadowlands of the village early every morning over a period of time, but no trace of her could be found at any other time of the day.
Archaeologists believe that the first people arrived in Ireland around 6000 BC. They came here from Scandinavia, through Scotland, and on to the north of Ireland. At this time, all of the present-day island of Ireland was covered in vast, dense forests. Irish forests were of oak, ash, beech, and elm trees. These Neolithic settlers, or Stone Age people, were close to nature and lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering. A supply of fresh water was their greatest need because it is vital for life. And so, many of these early people settled near rivers and lakes. The hinterland surrounding present-day Clonlara was an ideal location, being so near Ireland's longest river, the Shannon. They used axes to clear the trees and had many tools made of stone and flint. They were skilled potters and weavers and lived in dwellings made of wooden frames covered in turf sods.
These Neolithic people built huge stone burial chambers called megalithic tombs. This one is found in Truk. It is one of many found in the entire county of Clare. It is called a portal dolmen or wedge tomb. Notice the upright stones forming an entrance to a chamber. The horizontal capstone or dolmen was then placed on top. This thin capstone sits on two high portal stones to create a chamber in a low cairn. Notice the Truk dolmen is surrounded by a low mound, largely made up of stones. It is also worth noting that in this locality there is another similar dolmen at nearby Ardnatagal O'Brien's Bridge. Archaeologists thought that these formations were altars, where ancient Druids would make sacrifices to their gods. Throughout Irish folklore, people believed that these dolmens were the beds of romantic lovers Deirdre and Grania. Archaeologists have excavated other portal dolmens like this. Ireland's largest portal dolmen can be found at Powell-na-Brone in the Burn. We presume that someone of great importance in this locality was buried here in Truk. Today we can only imagine how the Stone Age builders lifted the top capstone or dolmen. They used wooden levers or props of wood or stone with timber rails laid on ramps. One thing we can say with certainty is that they were skilled craftsmen.
This
This holy well of St. Seanáin has been a feature of the religious life of the people of Clonlara and surrounding districts for longer than records have existed. And while pilgrimages to it are not as common as in the last century, many people still visit, particularly on the parish patron day, August 15th. In 1956, a major renovation of the well and its surroundings was undertaken under the auspices of Muintir na Tíre. All sections of the parochial community volunteered many hours of their time. The statue of St. Seanáin in Italian marble was specially commissioned, a gift of a parishioner, Mrs. Mary O'Dwyer of Knockbrack. The cutstone canopy was acquired from North Tipperary County Council by the late Canon Michael Hamilton. It was dismantled at its original site outside Nina Courthouse and placed in its present position in the autumn of 1956. Father, could you tell us any more about the history of the well?
Well, other than what you have been saying there, Tom, this is a very, very special place for the people of Clonlara and the surrounding area. And they come here to pray and find solace and consolation for all the trials, tribulations and difficulties that they have. And they come along here just to do the rounds. So in a few moments we will say the prayer to St. Seanáin, and also they used to do 5 Our Fathers, 5 Hail Marys, 5 Glory be to the Fathers. But today we'll just do 1 Our Father, 1 Hail Mary and 1 Glory be to the Father. There have been miracles attributed to this particular well, and the most recent one was a Martin Mullins. He was the fellow, the Hyde man who collected dead cattle and so forth. He came along here, he suffered from violent headaches for years and years, and he came along on 3 consecutive days and said prayer to the Seanáin, did the rounds, and his headaches disappeared.
Grant, we beseech thee, O Almighty God, that the prayers of thy servant Seanáin may increase our devotion and make sure our salvation through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Mar a bhíar dúis mar atá, mar leis mar bá, leis
The legend about this holy well is as follows. St. Seanáin was travelling through the area and fell asleep at this spot. When he awoke, he was very thirsty and thrust his staff into the ground, and a flow of water gushed up, enabling him to quench his thirst. A well was dug on this spot and became a place of pilgrimage.
Old Sir Hugh Massey was a good and kindly landlord who lived in Dunas many years ago. He often heard his workmen telling of the wonderful cures that had occurred at St. Seanáin's holy well. One workman was forever telling about the water's cure to cure blindness. His poor old grandmother couldn't see a thing. She went to the well and she knelt and prayed and then blessed her eyes in the water. When she returned, she could see perfectly. Old Sir Hugh had a blind horse, and he told the workman that if the horse could be cured, he would have faith in the virtue of the water. He took the horse down to the well and he asked the workman to bathe and bless the eyes, which they did. The horse immediately began to lift his head and look all around him. But poor old Sir Hugh Massey was struck down with blindness and madness, and his face became all distorted, and he had to be carried home. But the locals knew that he was a good and kind man, and he didn't deserve such a thing. They asked the priest to bless him, and which he did, and he went on to live a happy and healthy life. Sinné má scéal má tá breig an bíoch ní mise a chun ná ceapé.
Rinne Sir William Petty, Studéir Cuimsehog, Bhailte Fearan na hÉireann. Sna blianta 1654 agus 55. Tá Bhailte Fearan an fearóiste seo, léirithe go sa léir, sna léir scálanna a dénach ag an uair seo. Freisin, Thug na Scoilairí, Seán ó Donna Bhain, agus Owen ó Cowrie, Cuirtar Clonlarach. Thart timpealar 1800 agus 10. Chun stadéir a dhéanamh nósanna sóisialta agus ibre na háite. Tá tiúncra na Gaeilge le feiceáil go sa léir na hanamna go seo. Agus is crutha é raibh an Ghaeilge á úsáid mar go ná theanga an phróiste roinnt blianta ó hin. Seo liste na loganamnacha agus a míú go bhistúin.
This is Scoil Seanáin Castle. This castle is said to have been built by Donnacha, son of Taigh Mac an Mara, about the year 1460. It stands on a limestone rock in the town's land of Scoil Seanáin, some 3/4 of a mile east of Clonlara village. The tower stands about 45 feet or 13.5 metres high and measures 30 feet by 25 feet at the base and is a 3-storey structure. It stands in an outcrop of limestone rock, which was well chosen by the original chieftain, as it gave an immediate extra altitude on a very sound base. It is built of good rubble masonry and has well-cut windows and doorways. A large aperture in the roof, used for pouring boiling water over unwelcome visitors, is of particular relevance. Its function as more a tower house than a castle was as a tax collection centre for the Earl of Thomond. It was also used for protection in times of war and also as a dwelling house. Historical belief is that bonfires could be set upon its roof, which were also visible at Rinroe and the now levelled Newtown Castle, signalling times of danger or attack. Legend and local Shanachas also tells us that an underground tunnel connected all 3 castles so that refuge could be sought by any if under continued attack. To date, however, no evidence of such has been found. Does that mean it didn't exist? The castle has some very fine cut stone doorways and windows. The main door faces east, and inside there is a near perfect spiral staircase with 64 stone steps, which is a work of art, unique and unsurpassed, or so it is claimed locally. The windows are formed by slits modified by a shot hole at the base. In returns of castles in 1570, Scoil Seanáin was held by Donal Taigh Mac an Mara, and in 1574 it was held by Taigh Og Mac an Mara. In 1641 it fell to the hands of the Earl of Thomond, and in 1659 was occupied by Elias Prestwick. The last person to live in the castle was a weaver by the name of Quinn.
Rinroe, or St John's Castle, is situated in the town's land of Rinroe and marked in the Ordnance Survey maps as St John's Castle. This thickly ivied castle was built on a natural limestone platform in the low ground on the right-hand side of the road from the village to Dunas. A point worth noting is a tremendous stone weighing several tons and the last course of the stonework on top. The castle has always been a subject of local folklore and is said to be haunted by a ghostly black bull with fiery eyes. One story tells how this ghostly black bull at high noon on a summer's day, threw its tail around a small haycock and drew it into the castle ruin. Many believe it was one of the Trinity of castles, erected around the same time by the McNamara clan, there as being Coolesteig and Newtown castles.
This is where Newtown Castle once stood. Formerly known as Nadanora Castle, it was built by Lachlan Clonlara about the years 1380 to 1400. Considerable repairs were carried out in the year 1530. The tower used to stand about 13 metres high and contained 3 stories. It also had a vault which is now covered in. In the returns for 1570, Nadanora was held by Sheeda McNamara without any guarantee for his loyalty. In 1574, the owner was registered as Donal Rowe McNamara. In 1641, the Earl of Thomond gained possession from the Earl of Ormond, and its last known occupants were Daniel Barry and Conor Clancy.
Behind that wall over there, local fairs were held on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, June 11th, September 21st and September 29th. Much buying and selling of livestock and other merchandise occurred, but also games, dancing, eating, drinking, gambling and even faction fighting.
Clonlara had a forge. This photograph illustrates a typical Irish forge of the late 1800s. Clonlara Forge was adjacent to where the Dairy Vinner houses now are, right behind me here. This stone here was used for banding cartwheels.
There were 2 stations of the Constabulary Police, one situated here at the parochial house where Father Clare now lives. The other was down at the end of the village where Mrs. Hannon presently resides.
There was also a pharmacy, known then as a public dispensary, and a doctor's house, where we find this house today.
A courthouse was located in the site but had to be demolished. Petty sessions were held once a month on a Friday for the recovery of small debts. This setting, in more recent times, was Canny's store.
The military built this bridge in 1942 as a conveyance for them. While they were stationed in Dunas House, they had lodgings in Dunas.
This beautiful section of road in Summerhill is bordered on both sides by magnificent lime trees, which are protected by law. It is known locally as Mrs. Phelps's Avenue, as she had these trees planted to glorify the entrance to her estate at Waterpark.
In the 1790s, Protestants from the north settled here, in the Coolesteig Road. They were given land by the infamous Oliver Cromwell.
Some settlers were skilled in the process of bleaching and were employed in a large bleach mill in nearby Waterpark, Dunas. To the locals, this area became known as English Town due to the large numbers of foreign settlers. Family names such as Butlers, Browns and Hoggs are associated with this neighbourhood.
Standish Hayes O'Grady was born at Erna House, Clonlara,
Just down the road there.
in May 1832. He was a well-respected Irish scholar who studied Irish manuscripts extensively in the British Museum.
In the 18th century, between Coolesteig and Erna, was the village of Listoff. There were around 35 dwelling houses and a school with approximately 60 pupils. Not surprisingly, like so many other Irish towns and villages, Listoff had 2 taverns or public houses, namely Donohue's and Murphy's.
This is the last thatched house in Clonlara parish.
Over a period of 25 years, from 1775 to 1800, the Masseys rebuilt Dunas House and landscaped the area around the Falls of Dunas. A folly house, known locally as the Turret, was built on the ruins of Dunas Castle, which was probably built by the McNamara clan. It stood on a prehistoric site known as the Fort of the Cataracts, Dún an Assa. In 1570,
The castle was kept by the Earl of Thomond for the Queen's use. Later, a hexagonal tower was added on to the original site of Dunas Castle. It was said Sir Hugh Massey was a member of the Limerick Hellfire Club. Many weird tales have been told about the Hellfire Club. At night, it was said, the district echoed with screams coming from the desolate building, resounding over the waters of the Shannon, and Satan himself, it seems, presided at some of the meetings. In spite of its reputation and weird stories, the turret is still a great source of interest. Many people believe they feel an eerie, perhaps sinister atmosphere when visiting the structure. Could it be that our ancestors were correct, or is it that their folklore has had its impact upon us hundreds of years later? All traces of the ancient Dunas Castle and site disappeared when the Masseys laid out the grounds for Dunas House about the year 1800. Dunas House itself can be seen on the left as you pass through Cade Míle Fáilte steps, which are located on the grounds of the Angler's Rest Bar and Restaurant. Reverend Charles Massey lived here in the late 18th century and early 19th century, and Sir Hugh Massey also resided here. In more recent times, Shane Wiseman, the biochemist, Zionist leader, and son of the first president of Israel, also lived in this beautiful dwelling.
The history of Clonlara and the heraldry of the Landowning Massey family are inevitably connected. Tradition has it, and evidence proves, that the Masseys of Dunas were good landlords and that their tenants were able to negotiate reasonable rents. The original Massey family came to Ireland in the 1640s when Oliver Cromwell came to suppress an Irish rebel insurgency. They were later granted lands in appreciation of their services. The association began in 1739 when Reverend Charles Massey leased from the 8th Earl of Thomond the manor house in Dunas and lands for a yearly rent of £212. Turlough O'Carolan himself, the blind harpist, was a visitor to their house. Reverend Charles died in 1766, and his son Hugh continued managing the Dunas estate of 4,625 acres and some 3,950 acres of lands nearby in the parish of Bodford, which his late father had bought in 1749. Hugh Dillon Massey married Elizabeth Stackpoole of Ennis, and they had 3 children, Hugh, Charles and Mary Frances, who we will hear about later. He sat in Westminster as an MP for County Clare. Sir Hugh's eldest son Hugh, born in 1767, succeeded the estates. He married Sarah Fetcham of Surrey, England. He was a model landlord by extensively improving the estate and encouraging his tenants to improve their quality of life. He built Clonlara village in a 4-year period from 1834 to 1837. Around the year 1837, Lady Massey gave a building rent-free for the purpose of a school.
Having no male heir, the estate was passed to Hugh's nephew, also named Hugh, born 1797, the only son of his brother Reverend Charles and Mary Ann Rose Lewin. Hugh's parents had their marriage dissolved after his mother eloped with Lord Thetford, who was grey-haired and many years her senior, on a Sunday as his father conducted Sunday service. The couple travelled by boat from Dunas to an awaiting carriage in Castleconnell. Reverend Massey brought a case against the Lord for criminal conversation. It was sensationalist and heard in Ennis Court on the 27th of July 1804. After a lengthy hearing, the jury found in favour of Reverend Massey, who was awarded £10,000. Hugh, the 3rd Baronet, acquired the estate in 1842, aged 35 years. He was a local magistrate, deputy lieutenant and a high sheriff. He married Mary Westrop of Attyflynn, County Limerick, in 1818. They had no children. Sir Hugh had the unenviable task of steering the estate through the Great Famine.
Tenants couldn't pay rent, resulting in a substantial drop in much-needed income for the Masseys. This ultimately led to the sale of the Broadford section of the estate in 1858. Sir Hugh died in Dublin in 1870. The regard and esteem held for him by people of Clonlara, many of whom were his tenantry, was evident in the huge funeral procession from Dunas House to the Church of Ireland, where he was interred in the family vault. A large monument was erected in the village reading, erected by the grateful tenantry to the good Sir Hugh Dillon Massey, Baronet of Dunas House, who departed his life on the 29th of October 1870, aged 70 years. This was demolished in 1956. Hugh's wife, Lady Massey, died in 1890 and was also buried in the family vault. Her nephew became the new owner. Successive generations of Masseys made a very real and meaningful contribution to the social, cultural and economic development of the Clonlara we know today.
Hi, I'm Margaret and I'm going to tell you a story about the lovers' tragedy at Dunas. Mary Massey was a beautiful young girl who lived in Dunas around 1780. In her childhood, she met Lord Clare, and it was love at first sight. She found him dashing and charming, and he worshipped the ground she walked on. When they went out walking, some people walk like this, normal people. Well, they walked like this together so that they would not have to take their eyes off each other. Dream. But anyways, and they loved each other. But one night, Lord Clare got news that he had to go abroad for some time, and his ship was waiting in Limerick. The night before his departure, they had a silly lovers' row, as we all know may sometimes happen. Later that evening, Mary began to think of the long, dangerous sea journey ahead of Lord Clare, and she decided they must part as friends. So, she went down to Dunas to ask the local boatmen to take her over the rapids. A heavy mist and dense fog had fallen over the river, and the boatmen knew it was far too dangerous to chance a crossing. She begged and begged him, and when he saw how upset she really was, he agreed to take her over. Meanwhile, Lord Clare was also heartbroken, and he had returned to the banks of the river to make it up with Mary. The waters were becoming rougher, and it was really difficult to see. Suddenly, she saw Lord Clare waving at her from the bank, and she shouted out, "I return to you, my love!" With that, there was a piercing scream, and the boat and the people on it disappeared from view, never to be seen again. This sad story is recounted by Michael Hogan, the great bard of Thomond, and Ellen Horgan will now quote a few lines from the poem.
Oh, what swift, deceitful current! Oh, the pall of mist hung there. There is woe for that frail vessel. There is woe for young Lord Clare, wildly watching by the river, with the rapture and the pain of a love, the best and brightest, shining freshly after rain. Faster beat the nearing paddle, darker still the misty pall. Steer for me, the lover shouted. You are running on the falls. Still the boatman's stroke came quicker, but his rigid lips were dumb. Yet a girl's voice skimmed the water. Clear and sweet it said, "I come." Next moment all was silent. Then a wild and grating crash, with a shriek that rose terrific high above the torrent's dash. Rose next morning sun as brightly, smiled as beautiful the scene, sang as sweet the summer songbirds, as if naught of grief had been. But sweet Mary and the boatman, the beautiful and the brave, to the gladness and the sorrow, were asleep beneath the wave.
The ruins of Dunas Church are located about 2 miles from the village of Clonlara. The church was built by the McNamaras in 1461 using limestone. During the reign of Henry VIII, Britain changed from a Catholic to Protestant country. This happened because the Pope would not grant Henry VIII a divorce from his wife. As a result, Henry VIII decided to become a Protestant so he could divorce his wife. Because he was ruler of Britain, this country's religion changed to Protestant too. Dunas Church became a Protestant church at this time as Ireland was ruled by England. In 1693, the Church of Dunas had fallen into disrepair and for the past 3 centuries has remained silent and roofless. St. Sena's Well is located just outside the graveyard. There are some interesting tombstones erected in Dunas graveyard. One in particular has the name O'Halloran, sculpted and erected in the year 1806 by a heartbroken man to his departed wife. The figures of the angel Gabriel and a skeleton, believed to be that of his wife, appear on the headstone. Tombstone is still standing.
This is the wart well. Legend has it that if you dip your wart in the water and leave a coin, whoever takes your coin will get your warts and yours will disappear.
This is the Protestant cemetery and church. The church was built in 1782. In 1831, a tower surmounted by 4 pinnacles was added. It was designed by the architect James Payne. James Payne and his brothers were responsible for the design of many buildings and bridges around Limerick. They also designed the Dromoland Castle. The chancel and 2 small transepts were erected in 1891, a gift from Lady Massey. The interior of the church is highlighted by a colourful variety of stained glass windows. One window shows Jesus and the Last Supper. There are memorials within the church, erected by many well-known families, including O'Grady, Welsh, Phelps, Vincent and Massey. Most of the burying ground is situated at the west end and along the north wall. The Massey vault is at the centre, usually the oldest position. Besides the vault is the oldest recorded burial, that of Elizabeth Rossell, who died in 1803. Yew trees and lime trees surround the church and graveyard. Yew trees are poisonous to animals and were planted in the graveyard to prevent farmers allowing their cattle to graze in the graveyard.
This is Chample Graveyard. Chample Vacolia, a little graveyard and the remains of a medieval church, is located in the townland of Garan. Tradition tells us that McCullough was a brother of St. Seanáin Naofa, who founded the parish church in Dunas, although historians believe the McNamara clan built the existing church. St. McCullough is reputed to be the person who presented St. Bridget with her veil. Many people from Garan, Shravacky and the surrounding locality are buried in this cemetery. In addition to this, many people from Limerick City who perished during the Great Famine were buried in a mass grave here, due to the unavailability of burial space in the city. Locals have often found personal possessions, for example bone pipes, when a new grave is being opened. It seems the unfortunate people who died of starvation or disease were just taken as they were found and placed in a mass grave. The graveyard is circular in shape and covers 1/4 of an acre. One holly tree stands amidst the ivy-covered memorial stones, some dating back to 1780. Very little of the church remains. The historian Samuel Lewis in 1842 states that the church was destroyed down to the foundation stones.
We are standing in Chapel Graveyard, the site of a mass grave. Although the Great Famine of 1845 to 1848 struck many parts of Ireland, it didn't affect every area as severely as others. Distress was most severe in the western part of the county and the Union of Scariff. In Clonlara, the famine was much less harsh than in other districts. This does not mean that there was no hardship, hunger or distress. There certainly were families who relied on seasonal or part-time jobs. Yet it seems unlikely that anyone died of starvation. Very few really escaped the hardship which the Great Famine brought with it. The amazing decrease in population in 10 years shows the impact of the famine. In 1938, the Irish Folklore Commission collected from every rural national school in Ireland the oral history and traditions in its surrounding locality. Several of the senior pupils in Clonlara National School under the principal, Mr. Patrick Honan, participated, and 2 compositions were recorded as Black 47. And the following testimony was recorded from Josie Maloney in 1938. Her father was John Maloney, a carpenter from Clonlara.
Black 47. This was the worst period in past history. People were very poor, but when the potato crop failed, the famine set in. They died in hundreds of starvation. Poor men were to be found huddled together on the roadside, dead, with signs of grass in their mouths. The Irish in America sent a cargo of Indian meal, which the British sunk in Cork Harbour. The cholera broke out, and where people were so poor that they couldn't afford coffins, they just dug a big hole and buried their dead. Much is not known with regard to the hardships which were endured by the inhabitants of this parish during the famine years, but a story told to me by my father will throw some light on the subject. My great-grandfather, a farmer, happened to have a garden of turnips in fairly good condition when the famine began to take its toll. The news spread to the neighbouring parishes with lightning rapidity that food was to be had in Kiltannon and the starving people came in bands beseeching him to give them some of the turnips to appease their dreadful hunger. The story goes that the visitors were terrible to look at, staring eyes and emaciated bodies. My grandfather, being of a kind nature, could not refuse their requests. He gave them the turnips while they lasted. Then, very soon, all the turnips were gone. Bands from still farther districts, hearing of this great news, came looking to him for the turnips. And when they discovered that they were too late, they ravenously devoured the leaves of the turnips, decaying or decayed in the furrows. Adjacent to my native village, close to the old castle of Nyadanora, there is a large rocky mound, and the old people say that this was a burial ground during the famine years. Judging by the size of it, it looks as if hundreds of people were buried there. Another story is told with regard to the famine in my locality. Sir Hugh Dillon Massey, a rich landlord living in Dunas House, had several gardens of turnips when the terrible disease spread. People came to him from far and wide, but he refused to help them, and when they had recourse to violence, he ordered the garden to be guarded by several men armed with blunderbusses. A son of one of the guards by the name of Tom Houlihan died about 8 years ago, aged 90. The years immediately after the famine were terrible ones, but the old inhabitants say that although people in neighbouring localities died like flies, Kiltannon was comparatively lucky. To the rich alluvial soil by the River Shannon is attributed the fact that the blight in my neighbouring districts was not near as bad or spread so rapidly as in the neighbouring districts. To relieve the distress of the people, a relief scheme was started in the parish by the government. A road was started from Clonlara Church, passing by the side of Nyadanora Castle, but the scheme had to be abandoned after a while because of a shortage of funds. It is interesting to note that when the Shannon scheme was begun 12 years ago, this unfinished road was taken on hands and completed.
During the period 1841 to 1851, the population of all the townlands in Clonlara decreased dramatically, except for Listoff and Illanregan. Listoff increased from 17 to 68 inhabitants, with Illanregan increasing from 67 to 85. Some of the huge decreases were in Achboy, down from 220 to 95, Capavilla from 201 down to 110, to Kildores from 216 down to 132, and most dramatically of all, Rinroe, whose population dropped from 177 to 5, and whose number of houses dropped from 26 to just 2. Mr. Burke, what was this building used for?
This was a granary used for the storage of corn, the distribution to the local people during the Great Famine of 1845 to 48. The letters LR stand here on the gable end, stands for Luke Ryan, the man who did the distribution of the corn, and the year 1848 was the year it was built.
The Canal Bridge is one of many bridges in our locality. It has been said that a she-ghost haunted the Canal Bridge of Clonlara while it was being built in 1769, the same year as the old canal was being built. She is believed to have lived under the bridge in the water. The old canal was finished in 1801. There is a good look charm located on the inside wall, even though much of it is defaced and eroded. This figure resembles the grotesque and indecent carvings of female figures called Hags of the Castle and now known as Sheila and a Gig. This is of Mediterranean origin, and this example is quite large in comparison to the 4 other similar formations, one of which is above the door in Kilnaboy Church. This sculpture originally came from Dunas Castle, according to tales of local lore. Superstitions have been alive in Clonlara for many years, as numerous generations of passers-by spat at the statue for good luck. The original bridge was narrow and humpbacked, and was actually dangerous for cars to drive over, and therefore it was rebuilt in 1974.
The old canal was once an important inland waterway, opened in 1799 after taking some 40 years to build. Its primary purpose was to allow boats to travel between Killaloe and Limerick, thus avoiding the Falls Dunas. Initially, all transport of goods and passengers were horse-drawn. In 1843, it was possible to make a journey between Limerick and Dublin for €1.25 first class and 75 cents second class in today's money. The canal system was an invaluable means of transporting heavy goods. The great bell of St. John's Cathedral was transported by canal boat from Dublin to Limerick in 1859. The coming of the railways in the 1860s sounded the end of the canal. There are several locks along the canal itself, each one a feat of engineering, but one stands out in particular. It is a triple lock, and only one of 2 remaining in the country. The last contractors using horse-drawn boats were the Browns of Erina. In January 1924, John Brown was drowned while trying to rescue one of his horses, which had fallen into the canal. The canal ceased to operate after 1928. In recent years, Thomas Burke has built a dam across the old Clonlara loch and used the canal for rearing fish.
Any description of the Shannon scheme would not be complete without a few words on the bridges that span the canal. In all, 4 bridges were constructed. 3 over the headrace, namely Blackwater, O'Brien's Bridge and Clonlara, which was opened to the public in October 1928. The 4th bridge stands over the tailrace at Partine Village. All are built of reinforced concrete. As the canal was to be used for navigational purposes, the arches were raised high enough to give ample clearance of 3.5 metres from the high water level. This is the community centre, home to the present play school, run by Teresa Gleeson. In the background, you can see the new community centre, and GAA field is well underway. This will be a fantastic benefit to the parish when completed. Dad, when did this school come into operation?
This was Clonlara's first national school. The school opened for boys in 1884 with Patrick Crowe, a local man, as principal. A year later, the girls' school opened, and it was Marcella Hamilton was the principal. The Gaelic revival was continued by Patrick Honan, a native of Balnakelly in West Clare. On hearing of a teaching post at Tulla, he walked to Tulla, and on arrival he was told the position was filled. The parish priest told him Clonlara were looking for an assistant teacher who could teach Irish. He proceeded to Clonlara and was given the post. He became principal in 1919, and his son, Paddy, was the last principal here and the first principal in the new school up in the village. Another teacher was your great-grandmother, Lena Hogan, later Lena Sheedy. She was a native of Miltown Malbay. While at the teacher training college in Dublin between 1913 and 1915, she was taught mathematics by Emma de Valera. In 1915, she secured a teaching post in Dunleary Convent. Later that year, she joined Cumann and together with her brother took part in the 1916 rebellion. She was appointed to Clonlara in June 1917 and remained there until her retirement in 1961.
Dad, was this school used for anything else?
Many committees and societies met here from time to time. Adult Irish education held classes here in the 1920s and 30s. Irish music, Irish dancing were all taught here. It was the foundation place of the ICA, Muintir na Tíre, the Art Confraternity, the Legion of Mary, and as well, a lot of political meetings were held here.
Dad, can you tell me how our present school progressed through the years?
The present school was opened in 1969 while Father Hennon was PP here. It has continued to grow and expand. It was expanded in 1984 and a further expansion is taking place at the moment. With the many new developments in the area, it's likely that another extension will be needed in a few years' time.
We are now outside Sellybank School. Can you give me a brief outline of the history of this school?
Yes, I can. This school was built in 1843 and opened on the 7th of January 1844 with 50 boys and 30 girls in one room. The school closed for 3 months during the spring of 1847 and closed permanently when John Ryan retired in 1969. It's interesting to note that from the day Sellybank School opened to the day it closed, 4 generations of the Ryan family taught there. One could say it was a Ryan dynasty as far as teaching was concerned.
This is Coolestag School. Around 1805, Jeremiah O'Grady started a hedge school here in this barn. In 1808, the attendance was 10 Protestant and 32 Roman Catholics. He taught reading, writing and arithmetic. In 1839, O'Grady made an application for grant aid to build a new school on a 2-acre site opposite Coolestag Castle. It was the first school in the parish to come under the National Board of Education. In the application, it was stated that there were 500 Catholic and 35 Protestant families in the parish. 2 years later, the Board of Education cancelled the grant. The school closed around 1850, possibly on the death of O'Grady. Even after a century and a half, the yard in front of this building is known as the Schoolhouse Yard, and the field at the rear is referred to as the Schoolhouse Field.
This is St. Seanáin's Church. The Church of St. Seanáin was built in the year 1869 from designs submitted by the great Limerick architect Mr. William E. Corbett. The spire, which stands at 38 metres high, was not added till some years later. The church is designed in an early English style and was built by Mr. John Ryan and Son, builders of Limerick. The materials used in the exterior were dark limestone from the quarries at Garryowen and white limestone which came from Ballysimon. Above the sacristy door is an inscription erected by Reverend Francis McMahon, parish priest of Naas, AD 1870. This is the house of God and the gate of heaven.
Reverend Francis McMahon was considered by many to be similar in both feature and figure to Daniel O'Connell, the Liberator. He was patriotic. It was he who was responsible for the building of St. Seanáin's Church in Clonlara. The baptismal font in St. Seanáin's Church is believed to have come from an earlier church.
A very good example of a two-funnel lime kiln is located in the field across the road from Scoil Castle. It is built beside a hillock to allow easy access to its top for horses and carts carrying limestone rocks. This farm was once known as Bentley's Farm, and its owner later died in a duel with, we believe, a man from O'Callaghan's Mills. The stone structure itself has cylindrical shaped funnel chimneys. Layers of 2 feet of turf and 3 feet of limestone rock were piled up to the top, and it was then set ablaze. This was a 24-hour kill, as it took a day for all the rocks to be turned into dust. This dust was then mixed with animal's blood to give it a sticky consistency and was used as mortar and early versions of cement for building and construction. The limestone itself was quarried very locally from a rich vein of rock stretching from George Crow's farm to Sean and Mary Rail's garden. The marks of the crowbars used to quarry it can still be seen in Rail's garden.
Few schools can substantiate the claim that hurling has been played on their school grounds for over 100 years. Crede, no cred. Sin Marathon Scoil i Clonlara. In 1896, the newly appointed priest, Father John Scanlon, a big hurling advocate, invited 2 North Tipperary teams, Ballinderry and Templederry, the latter being part of his former parish, to stage an exhibition game of hurling at Clonlara. This entered into folklore as the Game of the Two Derries. The village publican, Joe Maloney, provided the field known as An Fork Vaughan. An Fork Vaughan was later bisected by the Ardnacrusha hydroelectric canal in the mid-20s, and in 1969 became the site of the present National School. Clonlara Hurling Club was founded and affiliated to the Clare County Board in 1897.
No history of Gaelic games in Clonlara or in the county of Clare could be told without reference to that larger-than-life character, Monsignor Michael Hamilton. He was born in Clonlara in 1894 and attended the local national school. A brilliant academic, he was the only student in the history of Maynooth College to win the Solis Prize in 3 languages, Irish, English and French. He was instrumental in Clonlara's first and only senior county championship in 1919. He would have played, but for the fact that clerics were not allowed to play at that time. The War of Independence 1919 to 1921, the signing of the treaty, and the Civil War plunged Irish life into serious divisions. With atrocities at both sides, there were no neutrals in Irish politics. In 1923, the Clare County Board, under the chairmanship of Monsignor Hamilton, split into 2 rival factions. Fortunately, in 1925, both sides reunited under the stewardship of Monsignor Hamilton pro-treaty as chairman and Michael Hennessy anti-treaty as secretary. Thus, the GAA played a vital role in somewhat soothing the raw wounds opened by the Civil War, as both sides laid their differences aside to share their mutual love of Gaelic games. On a lighter note, the Canon was drafted in to broadcast the 1937 football final between Cavan and Kerry. He proclaimed Cavan's victory to the nation, following a last point, thus sparking wild celebrations in Cavan. However, the point was disallowed, and unfortunately the Canon was off air and had no time to rectify the mistake. Conor Houlihan, the famous sports writer, referred to him as the loose cannon in Croke Park. However, his finest hour arrived when he succeeded in having the 1947 football final played in the Polo Grounds in New York to commemorate the centenary of the famine. Again, it was between Cavan and Kerry, and this time Cavan won. Kilkishen GAA Field Hamilton Park is named after him, as is the Senior Hurling Championship trophy. Present Munster and Irish rugby hero Marcus Horn
represented the school in hurling and football, winning an under-10 Limerick City Hurling Championship medal. We've had several past pupils on hurling, camogie and football county panels, and the future continues to look bright.
My name is Emer Fitzmaurice and I'm now going to interview Father Cleary. Father, you have given long service to Clonlara and accordingly you are very well known and respected in the parish. When were you first appointed to the parish and what was life like then?
I was appointed here in 1963. It's a long time ago now, that's 43 years ago. I came from the parish called Scoil Flagmount and I came to the outside part of this parish known as Truk. At that particular time, things were completely different. The first thing that struck me when I came to the parish, of course, was that Clonlara isn't joined onto Truk at all. That was most extraordinary. There's another parish comes in between it.
What are the biggest changes you have seen in Clonlara in your time, and are they for the better or worse?
Well, I suppose like everything else, some are for the better, some are for the worse. Some are for the better in the sense that you can well imagine people have improved immensely, financially of course. When I came here originally, people were poor, you could nearly say, not poor in the sense of poverty, but really they hadn't much to spend, just the meagre existence they were able to. But since then, of course, more work, farms, they got more educated, more stock of the farms and so forth. So that is a big, big change.
Have you many early childhood memories of how hard it was to make a living?
Oh, I have a lot of childhood memories. If we got sixpence that time, we'd think, and we'd be promised sixpence, and that was provided. And provided we worked hard during the week, and if we did anything out of the way during that time, the sixpence was withheld from us. But they were hard for everybody. When you grow up in a particular environment, when everybody is the same and different, you don't notice it as much, because that was the norm at the time. We went out into the garden, it was also the time of the compulsory tillage, and that meant that farmers had to sow so much in order to feed people and all the rest of it because of the difficulties. And there'd be rows and rows and rows of drills of turnips, carrots, mangels and everything. And when we'd come home from school, first thing up to the garden, or else up to the meadow, or else down to the bog, there was always work. But it was the same for everybody. And we didn't realise that it was hard, if you know what I mean. Looking back on it now, it was very hard. But we were grateful to be able to do it.
Did Santi come when you were a small boy?
Santi was a very poor man that time. He wasn't a rich man then, Santi, because I can assure you that what we would get was what we were able to afford. And we were grateful for that. You had this stocking was hung at the end of the bed. That's when we do that before we go to Christmas Eve. And Santi would come along and put in a few things to us, the little rattlers or the little things. Sometimes we get snakes and ladders and roller or a ludo, a few little things like that.
People say that priesthood can be a lonely life at times. Do you find that, or have you any regrets?
None whatsoever. Thanks be to God and His Blessed Mother, I had never an unhappy day in the sense of my work as a priest.
As chairperson of the Board of Management of our school for many years, you have made valuable contribution to the success of our school. How was this achieved?
Well, success is achieved by the cooperation that you get from the members of the board. And we had wonderful board members, always. And we had a wonderful teaching staff as well. And when you have people with the same mind and the same aim, and that's what we had. We were there for the betterment of the school and for the children particularly in that school, and hopefully that shown at that time we did, and it is, because the school at the present time is considered to be one of the best schools in the area. For that matter, I challenge it with any other school in the county.
Thank you so much, Father, for giving us your time. It was most interesting.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. God bless you.
Well, there's an old man living near us, and he used to tell us stories about the famine, all right.
Yes.
My father didn't remember anything as far back as that. But this old fella, he told us that he used to see men and women heading for the workhouse in Limerick, which was 5 miles away.
Right.
And in many cases, they never reached it. They tried to walk to the workhouse to get food, and a lot of them died by the roadside. Well, there was a ring fort in our land, and we were always terrified of it.
Why was that?
There was an old, and he wasn't a very old man, but he lived locally, and I remember he telling a story one night that he was coming home from a wake after drinking a few pints, I suppose, and he was passing close to this cross country, this fort, which was in our land, and he was accosted by 2 little men in white flannel waistcoats, and invited him into the fort.
Yes.
And they took him by the hand, one on each side. I'm sure it was only a yard, but he had a great night anyhow. He had plenty of drink in the fort. And when daylight came, he was told to go home. Our shopping used to be done every Saturday. My mother used to go to Limerick, at the Limerick market every Saturday, and she used to do her shopping then thereafter. We made our own butter, by the way, and we sold a lot of butter and eggs and so on.
To kill a pig?
And most of our food is produced on the land, you see. We had our own cows and everything else, and very little food was purchased. I remember Patsy Corney calling the roll. The Monaghan's used to be nearly always absent. They hadn't arrived. And he often sent me down to the bend of the road, and he'd say, go down and seize the royal family on its way. He always called them the royal family. Right. And I, or maybe some other lad, was going down, have a look away in the distance, and invariably you'd see them coming, but taking their time, no hurry.
No panic.
And I remember they'd arrive then, they'd be questioned, sometimes put on their knees, and he'd have a cane, and he'd ask them what was the reason for their lateness, and they all had a different excuse. One would say, I think their father was dead, it was always their mother. My mother was sick, that was the usual excuse. And then, so other times they'd say, I had to take a cow to the bull. I'd take a goat to the poke. And then they'd get several slaps that put out their 2 hands, and they'd get belted in the hands.
That was it.
But they'd be late again the following day. I remember he was a big, powerful man, well-built man, and he had a chain across his waistcoat. And as Collins got out of the taxi, he addressed Collins, and he said, Mr. Collins, he said, looking at his watch, you're 7 minutes late, and you've kept the Lord Lieutenant waiting. And Collins, I think he said, God bless you, no, I'm not sure of that, but he said, look, he said, you people are here 7 centuries, and he said, and what bloody difference will 7 minutes make now that you're leaving?
My God.
This is 4th class. We have come here to sketch the Protestant church. This is Rangacuig, and we are doing a field study investigating the plants and the mini beasts found in our school grounds. We are senior infants, 4th class. Help us do shared reading every week.
Seas I never crossed, nor bid adieu to Clonlara, Castle upon the Lord to Mass. Go to the rock garden and take a refreshing breeze. It's there the holy hand of time has spread beneath its trees.
Seo rang sé agus táid ag bhaáil baró.
Bright and gay, wave their artificial flies in the merry month of May. Go eastward and westward and into the churchyard. White over and silent, would win your regard, with its crumbling walls of ivy and its robes of green grass, and
This is 1st and 2nd class doing painting.
You're not tired of walking, proceed on further still, until you come up to St. Seanáin's Well, where the lame, blind and weary a cure ever has, in the healing gift of heaven near the falls of Dunas. Oh, when shall my day come, that dear and happy hour?
We play board games sometimes, especially when it is too wet to go out. Seo ranga sé ag immert cléthe teanga.
Cain tú é.
Clock.
Leah.
Walking up here.
Lena.
Sure.
Jamie.
Vector Tira Air.
Let's go.
Sha.
Welcome to Senior Infants. We would love to sing our song for you. We hope you liked our song. We will now say a poem for you called The Lighthouse. I'd like to be a lighthouse, all scrubbed and painted white. I'd like to be a lighthouse and stay awake all night to keep my eye on everything that sails my patch of sea. I'd like to be a lighthouse with ships all watching me.
Show us your pictures.
This is first class and we hope you will enjoy our creative dance.
would like to play Turn on the Sun and the Rattling Bog on their tin whistles.
This is 4th class and we are going to dance the Siege of Venice. An Siopa Scola. Téann na páistí go dtí an Siopa Scola gach maidin.
An bhfuil siopa ascailta bhúntar.
Tágáid, catóid.
Bhfuil an peann garm agus peann darg.
Se.
Agus bhí lo arháin.
Má charin.
Freisin mar talé.
Sin chuige agus trocha sin 8.
Tá dheor arháin agam.
Right, agus
Cad maidin.
tá brise féile ag duldit.
Go míl mágat.
Fáilteród. Alex, Constable.
Tá mé cumá bhlam peann bairro darg agus bairro garm mar sin an.
Right, sin chuige. Agus sin chuig brise.
Go míl mágat.
Fáilteród. Caród. Catóid.
Bhlam bílor óin.
No, sin trocha. Tá, sin gart. Go mágat. Agus édín.
Bhlam cóplair matematica agus peann Louis mar dála.
Peann Louis. Ó, ní léon peann Louis agam. Ó, bhhaile déon rodile?
Rílóir mar dála.
Question number 3. Is this bird here, is it a siskin or is it a coltit? Siskin or a coltit? And keep an eye on the colours. siskin or a colted, okay? Right.
This isn't so hard.
Question number 4. This bird here, is it a greenfinch or is it a rook? Is it a greenfinch or is it a rook? Now don't worry about the spellings, okay? Is it a goldfinch or is it a blue tit? Okay? Goldfinch or blue tit. Now we're going through it all again, put on the hands.
For the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strides. I mean the bare necessities, the mother nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities to life. Wherever I wander, wherever I go, I couldn't be fonder of my big home. The bees are buzzing in the trees to make some honey just for me. If you look under rocks sometimes and take a glance at the fancy ants and maybe try a few, the bare necessities of life will come to you. All the leaves are dry, and the sky is gray, and the sky is gray.
And now, the whole class will be having their PE lesson. Each will be put into a group and be walking at a different station.
I'll be safe and happy.